I think that it's not probable, but the possibility has probably risen in the last couple of years. I think there's been a serious deterioration of the geopolitical relationships between the US and Russia and between the US and China. And I think that does make things more dangerous. But I think we're a long way short of thinking that a nuclear conflagration is actually probable.
And the tactics of nuclear warfare appear to have changed. In what respect?
Yes, that's right. It's a worrying development that it's especially clear with the US because they are more transparent, but there are reasons to think that the same is true of Russia as well, that they are attracted by the idea or by strategic doctrines that emphasize being able to use nuclear weapons and thus also being able to use them to advantage and thus potentially win a nuclear war. The other nuclear weapon owning states seem to have doctrines of minimal deterrence, which basically means that nuclear weapons would only be used as an absolute last resort if absolutely everything else had failed and probably everything had been destroyed anyway. But the Russians and Americans are getting close, as happened during the Cold War as well, especially in the 1970s, 1980s, to thinking that maybe nuclear weapons can be usable in the way that conventional weapons are.
So listening to you now, it does seem that we are stepping closer towards that nuclear brink, and it is really leadership-based. So will the world almost require a change of leadership to step away from that?
Well, I think the odd thing about the world at the moment is that amongst the great powers, there isn't one that favours the status quo and wants to look after the multilateral institutions. All three, Russia, China and the US, are all in different ways and for different reasons challenging the international political order and want it to be reshaped more in their benefit as they see it. So in those circumstances, I think what's extraordinarily important there is that the medium and the lesser powers get together more in order to be able to strengthen the multilateral institutions like the UN, but also the European Union, and also trust and confidence in treaties so that when they're signed, they will actually be adhered to and implemented and kept to. And I think that if we get that sort of that push for the multilateral institutions, then what we'll begin to see is that it's not simply a question of leadership that can keep us safe. It's also the institutional arrangements which exist. But more of the medium and lesser powers have got to stand up and be counted in defense of the multilateral system, because that is what peace and cooperation are going to depend on in the coming several years.
And that was Dan Smith, the director of the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, speaking to me there.